Hey everyone, I'm Dan from JazzComposersPresent.com, an online space where composers, musicians, and listeners come together to celebrate the music we love. I'm joined today by Chuck Owen, Guggenheim Fellow, Grammy-nominated composer with Jazz Orch, president of ISJAC, and professor emeritus of the University of South Florida. Chuck is here to show us effective ways to use solo violin in a big band setting.
I started using violin with my Jazz Orch almost 20 years ago. My initial attraction was driven more by the instrument's association with contemporary classical music, as well as folk and roots music traditions than jazz. And so its usage when I first started was more specific to certain works that needed that element. But in the process, I became really enamored with it. Its huge range, the versatility of the instrument, its ease in handling technical passages, and how it blends so beautifully and easily with the rest of members of the band. But at the same time, how distinctive it is as a soloist or just in tandem with playing the melody. As a result, it became a regular chair in the band and a very integral part. Now, it's very effective as a featured voice, of course, taking on multiple characteristics. It can be kind of sweet, it can be dark and moody, anxious, light, bouncy, somewhat ethereal, funky, earthy, all of which I've utilized. And it pairs beautifully with the other instruments in rendering melodies, which I actually tend to use more frequently than just as a standalone soloist, especially in playing melody. I frequently assigned it improvised solos, but I really like to use it in short solo fills. Now, that's not completely exclusive to the violin. I tend to like to do that with a lot of instruments in the band, allowing them to make improvisatory offhand comments rather than just extended solos all the time. But I find the violin particularly effective in this capacity as it can kind of sneak in and out of the other conversations so easily. Now, the first example we're going to hear is Warped Cowboy from my album Whispers on the Wind, which came out in 2017 and was nominated for 4 Grammys, including Best Instrumental Composition, which this tune was the nominee for that. We're going to start at the bridge of the tune, where I'm trying to allude to kind of a wistful kind of 19th century revival hymn sort of mentality, whatever that is. In the first couple bars, you're going to hear the violin paired on the melody with the alto sax. Then just 2 bars later, it's joined by the trumpet and an accordion. So pay attention to the blend. In the second 8 bars, the violin continues with this group, but it plays the melody an octave higher. It's not particularly a high register, but it draws additional attention to that line and to the violin. And by the end of the line, the trumpet section enters and quickly but smoothly kind of takes over the melody, and the violin just kind of disappears into that. So here's Warped Cowboy. I hope you heard at the beginning of the example how the violin contributed somewhat uniquely to the character of the melody. Later, however, and here's our first slide, bar 87 in the tune, you heard the violin was no longer on the melody, but active in supporting that sax counterline that you'll see there, as well as injecting a quick solo improvised aside just a few bars later. In this case, that's what I just talked about. Sarah didn't really actually play a line per se. She created more of an atmosphere, which is exactly what I want to give latitude to any of our soloists to do, but particularly the violin. Now, in the next slide, just the few bars later, the violin's still with the saxes, but it's useful in creating kind of a string section-like sweep up. I do that not only with sax sections, but I also do it with a section of like 2 flutes and 2 clarinets and bass clarinet. And it's very effective in providing just a little bit more kind of body to that sort of sensibility. Now, frankly, I'm astounded at the sheer variety of ways I've orchestrated for the violin over the years. The clear message here being that there shouldn't be any sort of reliance on formulaic usage of the instrument in a big band. It's just too limiting. You need to work to hear or imagine how the violin might enhance certain lines, voicings, colors, moods as the piece demands. The next piece we're going to listen to is an arrangement of Milestones I did from my very last CD, Within Us. It's clearly a different vibe than Warped Cowboy. And the intro here, the violin entrance is part of an angular motif consisting of a 2-note interval. The melody scored for violin, cup muted trumpet, and alto sax, while the harmony is played by the guitar, cup muted trumpet, and tenor sax. Now, while that line comes back just a few bars later, it quickly grows in stature to include most of the band. And while the violin helps solidify this line, it doesn't really dominate, and you kind of start to lose it. Just a few bars later, you'll hear the familiar melody start up, but now the violin is coming in with another counterline, this time paired with a trio of trumpets, just slightly coloring their sound. So let's listen to that, Milestones. I'm sure you heard the violin play a more forward role at the bridge there when it came in. On the next slide, you're going to see it's paired with only the harmon muted trumpet on melody, while a harmony part is played by the accordion and trombone and bucket. It's kind of somewhat ethereal, which was the point, and the violin isn't clearly intended to be prominent here. But 4 bars later, that same figure is reorchestrated and thickened a little bit, adding saxes and guitar, but the violin, once again, plays it an octave higher. This time it's pretty high, and it kind of just gives a sheen to the line. We've got one more example, and here's a sax soli with the lead doubled by violin. Now, I probably wouldn't do this in a more traditional Thad Jones-ish sort of environment, but here I thought the violin would add just a bit of grittiness to that sax soli. And notice the violin's pretty much in its low register. This barely scratches the surface of the ways in which violin can be used in a big band, but I hope it might stimulate interest in others including it more frequently. Because in addition to offering so much musically to the composer, it's just a great way to involve string players, particularly in school jazz ensembles, in performing and becoming more acquainted with jazz.
Thanks for watching today's mini lesson. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Drop any questions, comments, or suggestions for future videos down below. To watch our full-length events and participate in live Q&As with our presenting artists, head to jazzcomposerspresent.com. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.